It was the look in his eyes that stayed with me, not the words. A man in his early 70s, shoulders still broad from a life of hard work, but slumped that day under a weight he couldn't quite name. He sat across from me, hands resting quietly in his lap, and said, "I don't know when it started, but it feels like I've disappeared from my own life." There was no diagnosis written across his face, no obvious illness, just a quiet fading of energy, of desire, of something unspoken that once made him feel like a man. Moments like that, they stay with you. And I've heard versions of it from men of all kinds, farmers who never took a day off, engineers who raised families on calloused hands and grit, husbands who silently sacrificed for everyone else. They all speak the same language when they finally do speak. And more often than not, it comes out as a whisper. "Doctor, I don't feel like myself anymore. I'm Dr. Thomas Leighton." And if you're still listening, perhaps you've felt some of this too, that quiet sense of drifting, the question of whether your best years are behind you. And maybe, like many, you've blamed yourself for that change. Thought it was just age, or worse, weakness. But I want to offer you a different perspective. What if the feeling of fading isn't a failure, but a signal? What if it's your body's way of asking to be heard again? You see, there's a hidden mechanism still alive inside you that most men forget about as they grow older. Not a pill, not some miracle therapy, but a rhythm built into your biology. And it's been waiting patiently for you to return. In my 4 decades walking beside men in their 60s, 70s, even into their 80s, I've watched this rhythm come back to life sometimes with just 2 small changes each day. One in the morning, one in the evening. Simple moments that spark something powerful. I remember a man, we'll call him James, who once told me with tears in his eyes, "I feel like myself again." He hadn't won the lottery. He hadn't reversed time. But something in his body had clicked, quietly, like a light being turned back on. And that moment, that return to self, meant more than any lab test could measure. If this message speaks to you, type 1. If you're unsure, type 0. Either way, thank you for listening. Now, I want to talk to you about something that lies at the heart of this quiet transformation. It's not new. In fact, it's something every man has heard of, but very few truly understand. Testosterone. Most folks hear that word and think of muscles, gym ads, maybe libido. But testosterone is far more than that. It's not just a hormone. It's a deep biological truth, the core of masculine energy. It's what gives a man drive not just in the bedroom, but in the mirror, in how he walks into a room, in how he handles stress. It's the quiet fire that says, "I'm still here." And yet, for many of us, after 60, that fire starts to dim, not all at once, gradually, like a sunset that turns into dusk without anyone noticing. I remember Robert, a retired Navy officer, still sharp as a blade, but something had changed. He looked at me with eyes that had once scanned oceans and said, "I don't know when I started fading." There was no crisis, just a dulling, a distance between him and his wife, a lack of energy he couldn't shake. He still exercised, still ate well, but the spark, the masculine rhythm, was gone. You see, testosterone isn't just about performance. It's about presence. When it's balanced and alive, the world feels more vivid. Your steps feel stronger. Your reflection looks familiar again. And yes, I've seen it come back. Not because the men became young again, but because something inside them said, "I still can." And sometimes, that belief alone is enough to shift everything. So if you're wondering whether it's too late, whether your body still has what it takes, let me tell you something I've told hundreds of men before. Your body never gave up on you. It's simply been waiting for the right signals to wake up. And those signals don't have to be loud or complicated. They can start with something as simple as breakfast. One man I worked with, late 60s, retired teacher, told me he used to skip breakfast altogether, said he didn't have much appetite. But once we began a small routine, just a few specific foods each morning, within weeks, his energy returned. Nothing dramatic, just steady, real, like watching the tide come back in. It begins with 2 egg yolks. Not egg whites, not powdered egg substitutes. Yolks rich in natural cholesterol, which your body needs as the raw material for making testosterone. Without it, it's like trying to build a fire without wood. Next, 1 Brazil nut. Seems small, doesn't it? But that single nut contains enough selenium to support the very cells in your body that produce testosterone. It's not about how much you eat, it's about the message it sends. And finally, 1 spoonful of pumpkin seeds. Zinc. That's what we're after here. Zinc keeps testosterone from being converted too quickly into estrogen, which can happen more often as we age. Each bite, a quiet signal. Not fix me, not make me young again, but simply, I'm ready. Ready to return to myself. Ready to live with vitality again. If you're finding this helpful or you're just starting to think differently about your health after 60, consider hitting the subscribe button. That way, you won't miss future insights made just for men like you. And there's one more step, just as simple, just as powerful. It doesn't happen in the gym or the doctor's office. It happens in the quiet of the evening, when the world slows down and you finally have a moment for yourself. It's a small thing, really a bit of wild yam cream, gently applied to the inside of your arm. No fanfare, no big ritual. Just a soft moment where you remind your body, I'm still here. I still care. This isn't about applying testosterone from the outside. It's about coaxing your own system to find its rhythm again. Wild yam contains natural precursors, substances that gently encourage hormonal balance, rather than forcing it. Think of it like knocking on a door instead of kicking it open. And when done in the evening, when the body is winding down, cortisol is dropping, and the noise of the day has softened, that's when your body is most willing to listen. A man I knew, Leonard, age 74, had given up on feeling vital again. He'd done the diets, took every supplement his neighbor swore by. Nothing made a dent. Then he began this 2-part rhythm breakfast, with intention, and that gentle evening pause, and within a few months, he wasn't just walking more, he was smiling again. He told me something I never forgot. I didn't realize how much I missed feeling like myself until I started to come back. That's what this is really about. Not chasing youth, but reuniting with your own presence. And I want to share something else that often gets overlooked. In all our focus on what to add foods, habits, small rituals, we forget to talk about what to remove. Because sometimes it's not what you're missing. It's what's getting in the way. I've met so many men who do everything right. They eat clean, move daily, sleep on schedule, and yet they still feel off, still feel tired, like something's holding them back. And usually, it's something hiding in plain sight. Plastic, not all plastics, but the soft, flexible kind used in water bottles, food containers, and cling wraps. These often contain chemicals called endocrine disruptors, BPA, phthalates, which can quietly mimic estrogen in your body. When those chemicals enter your system, they throw off your hormonal balance. And for a man trying to reclaim his testosterone, that's like trying to sail upstream with an anchor tied to your back. One man, George, was meticulous, cooked at home, exercised daily, but he drank water from plastic bottles all day. Stored leftovers in plastic, heated meals in plastic containers. It wasn't until he made a simple switch, stainless steel bottles, glass food containers, no plastic wrap on hot food, that he finally noticed the shift. Better sleep, more steady energy, clearer thinking. And it made perfect sense. The body had been trying to rise, but something kept pushing it down. You see, it's not always about discipline. Sometimes it's about awareness, and awareness brings change. So, as you consider your mornings and evenings, those 2 small points in the day that act like bookends to your well-being, also consider what might be silently working against you. Because when you remove the noise, the body knows exactly what to do. We are made for rhythm. And rhythm doesn't demand perfection. It asks for consistency. A small meal, rich in natural nutrients. A brief walk after breakfast, not to burn fat, but to remind your legs they still carry purpose. A sip of water from a clean bottle. A bit of cream before bed, applied with care, Not because you're broken, but because you still matter. And over time, these simple steps become something greater than habits. They become a signal to your entire being. I haven't forgotten you. When a man begins to feel that inside himself, not from praise or achievement, but from his own actions, that's when he truly begins to heal. And it's not just chemical, it's emotional. There's one more piece I want to share. Something many men never talk about, even with their doctors. It's that subtle wall, the one you might feel inside your chest, when you wake up and think, maybe my time has passed. Not despair, not depression, just resignation. I've seen it in the way men look down when they speak, in how they fold their arms without knowing it, in the sighs between their sentences. And it's heartbreaking. Because I know what they don't always believe yet, that masculinity doesn't fade with age. It simply waits to be lived more deliberately. You're not here by accident. You've made it through things many people can't imagine. Loss, labor, love, illness, survival. And now, you face something more quiet, but just as important. The choice to keep showing up for yourself, not to impress anyone, not to reverse the clock, but to stand in the mirror, even with the lines and the silver hair, and say, I'm still here. That's what true strength looks like after 60. The strength to care, to adapt, to believe that life isn't done with you yet. A few weeks ago, a man in his late 60s sat in my office after months of following this simple path. He didn't talk about testosterone levels or numbers. He just said, I laugh more now. I feel lighter in my body. My wife noticed before I did. That's the power of returning to yourself, one gentle habit at a time. So yes, eat the yolks. Take that morning walk. Say no to plastic when you can. Sleep a bit deeper. And don't skip the evening moment where you remind your body and your spirit that you haven't stopped believing. Because when you do, everything begins to shift. And the mirror? It starts to reflect something strong again. Not perfect, not youthful, but present, alive, and worthy. And now we arrive at the quiet heart of it all. The part most men never say out loud, not to their wives, not to their sons, sometimes not even to themselves. It's that question that sits in the soul during the still hours. Am I still needed? Do I still matter? I've heard it in countless voices, masked beneath jokes, shrugged off with, I'm fine. But beneath it is a weight not of years lived, but of value questioned. And here's what I want to tell you, not as a doctor, but as a man who's walked beside many others on this road. Your presence matters more than ever. This isn't about reclaiming youth. It's about reclaiming connection to yourself, your vitality, your purpose. Because age doesn't take that away. It only asks that you stop sleepwalking through your days. I remember Harold. He was 79, lived alone after his wife passed. He told me he hadn't looked in a mirror for over a year. Said he didn't recognize the man staring back, and he didn't want to. But after a few months of simple change morning meals, that daily walk, no more plastic, deeper sleep, he came in wearing a pressed shirt and combed hair. He looked me in the eye and said, I feel proud again. That is the miracle of consistency, not a miracle of medicine, a miracle of return. And maybe that's what we all want in the end, not to be young again, but to return to ourselves, to feel strong when we rise in the morning, to feel clear as we speak, to feel like a man again, whatever that means to us. And that happens not in one sweeping change, but in hundreds of small, ordinary acts done with care. A spoonful of seeds, a single egg, a walk in the sun, a kind word to yourself, a night of sleep without regret. These are not medical interventions. They are reminders. And if there's one truth I want you to remember from this whole conversation, it's this. You are not broken. You are becoming. Becoming is quieter than people think. It looks like choosing to get up when you could have stayed in bed. It sounds like a soft exhale at the end of a long day, not because everything is fixed, but because you showed up anyway. And yes, it feels like dignity. Not the loud, chest-thumping kind, but the quiet kind, the kind you carry in your bones when you know you're living with care. I once had a patient, name was Joseph, worked in construction his whole life, said he hadn't cried since the day his father passed, but he cried in my office not out of sadness, but relief. He said, "I thought I had to keep pushing or I'd fall apart, but I never considered that slowing down might make me feel more whole." That was his turning point. Not a new workout plan, not some lab result, just a realization that strength isn't always about pushing harder. Sometimes it's about softening where we've gone numb. You see, we spend most of our lives surviving, making money, raising kids, showing up for everyone else. But very few men are ever told how to show up for themselves once the noise quiets down. And when it finally does, that silence can feel unbearable. That's why I believe this moment of life, your 60s, 70s, even 80s, is not a decline. It's a reintroduction, a slow and steady coming home to yourself. And that's why I keep showing up too. Not because I have all the answers, but because I've walked this path with enough men to know you are not alone. You never were. You just needed a reminder, a voice that didn't ask you to change overnight, but simply to begin again. A breakfast that nourishes. A body that moves. A night that feels like rest. A day that isn't rushed, but lived honestly. Even if you don't do it perfectly. Even if you forget for a week, then return. Because it's not about never falling off. It's about remembering that you're worth returning to. Every time. There is no expiration date on worth. There is no age at which a man stops deserving to feel like himself. There is only the moment you decide to care again. And that's where healing begins. So, if you've made it this far, if you've listened not just with your ears, but with your heart, then maybe you're already on the path back home. And I want to leave you with this. In all my years of practice, the most powerful thing I ever witnessed was not a cured illness, not a perfect lab number, but the light returning to a man's eyes when he finally felt like himself again. That moment, that light, it's still available to you. If this message touched you, perhaps share it quietly, as it was shared with you, because somewhere out there, another man just like you is still wondering if it's too late. And your story, your courage to begin again, may help him remember that it never is.